What we wanted to do is give an opportunity for the audience to hear from, a lot of the folks that are very active in the industry that share these values that Ken just mentioned, and have sort of different areas of expertise. So Christopher, Ellen, Michael, please come up. And in the interest of time, we have about 30 more minutes for this session. One, I just want to get, there's been a lot of discussion over the last day, yesterday and today, on sort of the state of Agile. Go ahead, sit down, and make sure your microphones work. And we're trying to, one, I always like to hear different perspectives, especially from folks that are out there meeting with many different companies, and not just in North America, all over the world. And this panel right here represents that. So part of what I want to hear and some of the sort of what I want to ask, from each sort of expertise that's up here is, where do you see Agile today? What are the challenges we're facing? And sort of like Ken said, how do we make sure that this continues to live on and is something that's looked at not as a fad, but something that's looked at as some type of way to better your organization, improve your competitiveness, and to try to articulate to the business the value of not only the practices, but the leadership component. So maybe I'll start first, from Michael, and the benchmarking and all the stuff that you do in the industry perspective. You can start, and then we'll just go down the line from Michael to Christopher. I'd like to ask the same question, where do you see Agile today? Whether you agree or disagree with some of the things that have gone on or discussions that have occurred, and where do you see sort of the challenges that we need to tackle today or the next 6 to 18 months in the market, because it's shifted. Even from our conference 4 years ago, I think we had sessions on how to do a stand-up in the first, and I'm not joking, we did. And they were valuable at that time. And I think as you see with our sessions, they're maturing as well. So where do you see, Agile today, and where do you see its challenges? Starting first with Michael, and I will then open it up to questions from the group after each one sort of gives their opening remarks.
Oh God, what a question. Is working?
Best wishes.
Thanks a lot. I'll go back to what I think Ken said about values, but I'd also say that it's about being. I have a friend of mine who's a really wise philosopher, former Cambridge University physicist, author, teacher of meditation, and it reminded me of something that a philosopher, Thich Nhat Hanh, once said about having peace, or being peaceful. And it really wasn't about getting peace or finding peace or buying peace. It was being peace, right? So people talk about agile as a noun, and I think it's more of a verb. I think it's agiling, instead of doing or getting agile, So I think it's a mindset that would resonate along the vibrations that Ken was talking about in terms of values. And it's about being the values and having that almost be in your DNA as you practice as a team. Where it starts to get corrupted, like money corrupts and power corrupts, starts to get really difficult. And I think in big organizations that are trying to be agile and nimble, it's almost like you got to create a sense of entrepreneurship and startupness, in the pockets inside of a big organization. So I think that's one piece of it. I don't think that, I can keep going on and on, but I think that I'd like to start with that. I would imagine that the panelists here have ideas about extending that idea, that concept. And then how do you actually create leadership in that kind of environment? Let's talk about, say, at the management and the executive level. What's their role? Certainly, I think it's about creating the ecosystem for that entrepreneurship and agiling to exist. And part of the problem could be that a certain generation that grew up in a different way of looking at software doesn't quite really appreciate it in their DNA. And so I think that finding leaders that really appreciate some of the beauty and the almost, I'd say, spiritual aspect of building software, creating great things, having amazing emotional satisfaction as well as physical and economic satisfaction of solving problems in the world. That's kind of where the inspiration comes from. And then with that, we want to be responsive to. And we want to be able to, if a problem comes up, to be able to respond to it and solve it quickly. Because I think that technologists are as much people as, say, a doctor might be a people person as a healer. We grew up always being the ones where people would look to fix things, to solve problems. Most of the time, I think we're like the eldest children in the family because they go to us, or we would be the family hero to fix stuff. And in that regard, we have a lot of social drive and drive to do good things. So I think it's about a beingness, not a getting or a buying, and then you got it, or putting the label on it.
Good point. I mean, and Christopher, he mentioned a little bit, and I know this is in your passion area around the culture and the leadership component. What are you seeing out in the market, and where do you see our largest gap as it relates to those skills within our organizations that you deal with, or even,
Cool, thanks. How do you put this into 2 or 3 minutes?
Yeah, a couple minutes, go ahead.
So I missed the beginning of the Agile movement, but I've been studying organizational agility since 1985 and doing team-based interventions in product development organizations since 1990. And I owe a great debt of gratitude, Ken, to you and the other signers of the manifesto. When I saw what you had done, when I saw Scrum, it gave me the processes and the tools that supported the interpersonal dynamics that I've been working with for 15, 20 years. And so I had my hand on the dynamics, but the rather linear, deterministic processes and organizational structures didn't support that. So in 2004, I wrote an article that said Agile is a mindset. It's a culture, right? It's not tools, it's not processes. Today I hear more and more and more folks saying that same thing. Where's it going? All I know is, those of you who know me and know my work, is I've been going my own direction, following my own nose, my own research, my own results, and very much against the mainstream game. So it's been challenging for many years, and I've stayed at it. And now the phone is ringing from people at higher and higher and higher levels and larger corporations saying, I think we're figuring out this is about leadership and it's about culture. It's not about management, it's not about structure, it's not about process, and I don't think a reorganization is going to fix it. So I can't tell you where it's going the next 6 to 12 months. I think what I will say is, as kind of a 30-year observer of social change, we're going to continue groping our way forward. And it's never going to be a perfect adoption or implementation. I think, Ken, you went through a lot of the frustrations, that you observe, and why can't people just see how right we are and adopt it? And that's not going to happen. It's going to continue at the pace that it's continued. There's a 50 to 75-year lag in education. So I tell executives that today they're steeped in a way of thinking that was valid 50 years ago. And it's going to take a while for that to change, and only the most enlightened ones are going to change at any rapid rate. So I can't tell you what the next 6 to 12 months is going to bring, but I'm going to say, you're involved in the best thing that there is here in terms of how to both perform and have a good life while doing it, and keep at it.
I don't know if this worked. Hello? I think you mentioned culture, and it's also a lot of the conversation is turning now to say it's about value, right? So it's not just about producing software faster, of high quality, is it bringing business value, right? And I know you focus a lot on the value stream component, Ellen. Maybe you can talk about what you're seeing out there with not only the product owner change and sort of, I think, just like you were mentioning, you're getting contacted more at higher levels. The product owner was a foreign concept even 4 years ago, probably even today, and very few organizations have that, or have that customer interaction, or that value, the ability to really identify and measure value. What are you seeing in that space?
Well, to echo, first of all, something that Chris said about people and collaborations, I mean, great products are built by people that collaborate really well together. And 13 years ago, I wrote this book called Requirements by Collaboration because I kept seeing this pattern over and over again, that it didn't matter what you wrote down or how big it was or how much information, detail you went to, it still ends up being about people collaborating together. And one of the things that I've observed, at least in the work that we're doing, is that teams are getting better and better and better at delivering. The engine is moving downstream, if I can use that term. Where I see the movement, so to speak, going is the struggle is upstream. We're not so good at discovery. We're getting better and better at delivery, but the discovery is a problem. And a lot of organizations are very focused on projects instead of products and what the real value of those products are. And I think a lot of us may be throwing around that value term about products. And I'm not talking about what Ken was talking about with organizational value. I'm talking about the product value now specifically. What does that really mean? And what we found is that there's not a lot of transparency about that because value is in the eyes of the beholder, as we like to say. And there's different beholders. And depending on your product, the value can change over time. You may have to get it to market quicker, or parity, or cost consciousness of a user. All of these things, we need to have conversations about this stuff because you can't boil the ocean, you can't deliver everything. And so I think we need to exercise better that discovery muscle and upstream as far as leadership, bravery, and courage to sometimes say no. We're going to limit our work in progress, and we're going to, using the idea from lean startup, which actually comes from science. I'm married to a scientist, so I was telling people in my other talk about, he gave me quite an exposition on what hypothesis really means to a real scientist. It's much richer and deeper than how we're using it, actually. But the idea is still, well, we think we're going to get this business value. Let's deliver, and as soon as possible, measure and use that feedback. But beware that there may be some lag in getting that feedback. Ken mentioned that before. It could be a lagging indicator depending on the maturity of your product. So, Agile is more than just a bunch of user stories in a backlog. And we really are struggling, or some organizations are struggling with exercising that discovery muscle and collaborating better to figure out what value really means.
Thank you. I would really like to see if anybody this is a great panel to ask questions too. Who has a question in the audience? There's one right here. Why don't we just open it up for questions, and then I'll try to help
direct this as best as possible.
You immediately raised a very interesting question for me because I'm coming from a developer standpoint. I'm observing what you said, that we're doing better on delivery than not discovery. Help me as a developer, being the downstream person, to give the help to the upstream people, and do you see that being part of the development process, or is it more of the process management process where that has to be dealt with? That's clear what I was asking. I kind of threw two questions in there.
Yeah, I'm looking for that silver bullet here. Has anybody got one? As far as helping, the first part of your question was help me as a developer discover what the value really is.
Yeah, how can the developers help that process? Because
So-
it looks to me like it tends to fall on more the project managers, more the business owners and things of that.
Right, so the issue seems to fall on, the point was the issue seems, I'm a developer and they're telling me what to build. It seems to fall on the project management to say, here's the right thing to build. One of the responsibilities of the delivery team is to help, I think this is a collaboration, is to help our product owners, our product champions, those leaders, figure out what is the best thing. So asking a lot of questions. Well, you want this feature, I mean, this is a very tactical approach, because you're a developer, so you're in the downstream area, but very tactically, here's a feature, go build this feature for me. Why? You know, the why 5 times. It sounds very simplistic, but it can get very rich. So one thing that I've seen some developers do to entice richer conversations with product owners and project managers, product managers, is to say, okay, so here's a feature, what are some of the possibilities for who we're serving, how we could deliver it, look at some of, we call them the 7 product dimensions, look at some of the options, and which of these is more valuable? Who are we serving from a user point of view? Oh, we have to build this data out, which subsets of data? So if you go down deep and ask some of those questions, you can that helps get to the why. But I really think that the project manager's responsibility is to help the team figure out who are the stakeholders, we call them product partners, and what are their value considerations. So stop and say, why? What's the value about? What are we trying to deliver to whom?
I want to tackle that a little bit. I think the magic exists in the spaces between the people co-located. Right, so instead of saying, help me as a developer figure out what they should be telling me to build that's valuable, I think the magic happens when people sit together and they think, and they hang, and they play, and they work out. And this is the mystical part of this whole idea of Agile. I was asked by a talk show radio, internet radio interviewer, what do I think defines Agile in a nutshell? And I said, I think it's about re-engineering the social contract. It's about completely redefining how we be together. So co-located teams, working in pairs, okay, mentoring, coaching, okay, being in one open space, bringing in, say, the product owners or the people who are the business analysts and having them sit together, okay? So co-locating during iteration, so people are talking about what they think they should build and what the stories would be, and then building it and having that be together. I think that's where the magic happens, where suddenly someone gets an aha, I got an idea, and this is really valuable, and this is something that would be really worthwhile. One client that I was working with, they build in software the ability to detect malignancy in imaging in tumors that used to be in the domain of pathology, you know, tissue analysis in a laboratory. And they found a way with software algorithms and imaging to be able to find out whether something was cancer from software, right? And they did it really well, and they were able to build the stuff and have the files be shrunken down so they could be distributed quickly to doctors so that people can have this collaborative look and diagnose, you know, with many minds, wisdom of the crowd instead of just the one. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that happens when people are together. Where things are going in the future, I think there's going to be more stress against co-location, right? Because we have smart people everywhere. There are fewer and fewer math and science graduates coming out of universities. It's hard to attract top talent. Not everybody lives in cities, although more people are moving to cities. So how do you get people together and have this magic that happens from being in the same space and agiling? Because that's where I think the ideas come, you know? And we had this breakthrough, and we can make this, and let's try it out and build it and experiment with it, trial and error, do it in an iterative loop. That's where I think, you know, the magic is and where the challenges are going to be. And talking about leadership for a second, that was just, you know, raised by my friend here, I think it's also leadership at the local level, like how good is your ground game, right? How good are leaders on the ground in the front lines? Yeah, leadership, exactly. Because it's not this command and control where the top leader says, I shall say that you shall do it this way, and lead, you know, follow. It's more like a self-organizing system where the leadership is at the local level, the ground game, and that's where all the greatness happens. So I think the leaders have to figure out how to create that ecosystem for that to happen, the environment for that to happen, for that social contract to happen. And then you have to measure it. Right? You have to be able to say, this works, here are the numbers behind this, here's the time-based patterns that are showing this. Here's how our agility index has been changing as we, change the way we are being. And here's how our cycle time is actually dropping, our responsiveness, and our bug rates are coming down, and it's working sooner, right?
Good.
Just a thought about your question. If you only think of yourself as a developer, you'll be constrained. If you think of yourself as a developer and a consumer, you can shed a lot of information on anything that's trying to be developed.
Talking about a consumer within the project, or putting myself in the shoes of the consumer of
Yeah.
my work.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Oh, product owner, I wouldn't buy it.
Go ahead.
Bart, we have a question back here too.
Okay, we'll do that next.
So Ken, I'm right here.
Hi.
This I got a little dichotomy in my head going on. So one, it's
called
the first time you presented. This is the first time you presented where I agreed with everything you've said, which is kind of troubling me. But that's just my natural state. But I think I find, and it's probably first for you but then for everybody, people try to end up buying Agile. So they try to buy Agile by buying Scrum. They
Yeah.
try to buy Agile and I'm not against making a lot of money off of stuff because we all want to make a lot of money, but I mean, you ended up creating a whole new org to try to deal with it. But how do you actually make sure that people aren't trying to buy Agile by buying Enterprise Scrum or whatever the next thing is, and they're actually, going to be Agile?
I'm not sure I understood the question. I loved the part where you agreed with me, but I wasn't sure about the question.
All right, so the point you made about the Enterprise, the Enterprise Agile framework, whatever
Yeah.
that is, people will make the same statements about Scrum,
Sure.
right? It says, we're out there hawking Scrum, and
Yeah.
people are just trying to buy Agile by buying Scrum, and if I take this training and I'll get 10,000 people trained, then all of a sudden I've bought Agile, right? So I think everyone at the table has the same problem the scaled framework has. So what do we do to prevent people from buying Agile?
I think to the extent that you constantly refer back to the manifesto, like you're working with a Scrum team and someone says, hey, this is the way you're going to do it. And the team says, well, we're working this way and it seems to be working better. Yeah, we know that, it says this, but this really would work well for us. And you're looking, you're saying, let's see and go with what you're thinking about and see what the consequences are. Jeff came at this more from the idea of lean, and I came at it from empirical process control. But one of the bases of lean is bottom-up thinking. And people will have their perceptions. People come at things from different points of view. Anyone who has bought an Agile or a Scrum training session knows that they're in for a world of hurt. Doesn't solve anything. So I don't think you have to worry about them thinking suddenly they're Agile. I think you can confirm that suddenly they think they're in pain.
Yeah, Christopher, maybe they're, you probably deal with it at the executive level. How are they thinking, or how are you getting them past the point of thinking they're buying Agile?
Sure.
Or they've done some training, so they're Agile, or XYZ.
Right. So for years, I've refused to take work that I thought was less than the value that they needed. So years ago, I decided to stop working for Executive A that wanted me to change Group B. So I was a change agent, very good at organizational change, because everybody knew that the problem was not Group B, the problem was Executive A. And so it became unethical for me to take Executive A's money. So I think the question that you're really asking here is an ethics question for those of us who are consultants, trainers, providers of tooling and other things in the Agile industry. I read something that was attributed to you, Ken. I don't know if you're going to remember writing it, but you just alluded to the same idea, which is that Agile doesn't solve your problems, it exposes them.
Right.
Right, if you're willing to confront them. So for 25 years, I've been studying the mind's responsibility process, and there's 6 ways we go into denial and resistance and not owning problems when we have them, and only 1 way that we actually own them. And to me, that's the most important information I know and have to share. So for me, I say we're going to start there, and then Scrum and Agile come after. And there's quite a following along those lines now that it makes a big difference when we truly understand how the emotional mind responds to impediments, responds to problems.
Martin Fowler lives pretty close to me, so does Jeff Sutherland. We tend to be a little group of crazy people. And Martin used to always say that he would never work with an organization unless they had utterly, completely hit the wall and had given up any hope of success. He said then they would be receptive to new ideas. I tend to be kind of less discriminate. I'll work with just about anyone because who knows, I mean, someone's going to pick up an idea who you didn't even think would, and they're going to pursue it, and they're going to think about it, they're going to be talking to someone else. This spreads in ways that I have found to be totally unpredictable. So I just go and see what happens, and the person who brought me in may have completely invalid expectations. I may go, stick pins in pictures of him at night or her at night. But, some number of people in that organization are going to sit and go like, oh, yeah.
Go do it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right?
I wouldn't miss a chance to spread the word.
Well, we have 5 minutes. Maybe just anybody has any. We have one more question. Where was that, Jennifer?
Over here.
One more, and this is the last question. Sorry, because we are running out of time.
Hi, my question is about the comment that you made, Chris, where we're 50 to 75-year lag in education. How do we push that envelope? How do we address that instead of sitting back and saying, hopefully the enlightened people will take us where we want to go? I have to deal with strategy for training and development in my organization, and I'm just curious on where you think the focus ought to be to help push that envelope.
I don't have anything brilliant to say about how to push or change that envelope. My data comes from the work of Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller, who said that every domain, every industry has its own lag. The shortest lag is in high tech, hence it's called high change, right? And so in high technology, ideas move from basic to application very rapidly, and they move across the industry very rapidly. In social and psychological and governmental and educational domains, we don't have that type of tight coupling between the discovery of an idea and the proof of it and the fact that it makes sense to other like people who want to adopt it. So there is an evident lag, and I don't know how to answer your question about how to push it. It's a lot like Ken said. It's a lot easier to help somebody out if they are at a place of complete and utter failure and crisis than if they're doing okay or good enough. So, my best customers are always either on the very back of the envelope, falling off, going out of business, or they're at the front of the envelope trying to stay ahead. But the ones in the middle are challenging, and so I just don't know how to answer your question.
So
So I try and enlighten people.
I have a thought on this. I bought a Volvo with safety subsystems from Conti, a big German subsystem company. It's got 100 million lines of code in it, mostly generated code. We're seeing our software in places which are more and more critical. Safety grids, power grids, smart grids, software, embedded software and stuff that's being put in our body. So we may have 50, 75-year lag, but there's a collision coming between the need for high degrees of competence for the products that are possible to be built and the thinking that's going on. And something's going to give. I don't know what it is. The thing I fear the most is government intervention with professional standards and things like that. Because the moment you start getting deaths due to bad software, bad design, bad quality, to the newer products that are being made with the newer technologies. The spotlight is going to be very, very harsh. And no one's going to wait, because there's a lot of, as we have, 5, 6, 7 billion, 8 billion, 9 billion, 10 billion people on Earth, and the technology starts holding us together more and more. The catch-up time, dog years, it's shortening.
Well, any last comments, Alan?
No software developer left behind, right?
Yeah. Last comments, and then we're done. Go ahead,
Yeah, I
Alan.
just had two comments about that. One is, and to pick up a little on Chris's point about being in pain and then seeing the need for gain, there's also something I found very powerful, and that is not just looking around for problems, but what's working around here. What's working, when are we doing our best work, and what are those circumstances? What is happening? There's a whole organizational development method and theory with practice behind it called appreciative inquiry. And that is some powerful stuff. The other thing is, the second thing is collaboration. I think that we need to educate from kids on up. What does that really mean? How does that work? Because collaboration does not just happen. Collaboration needs to be engineered into how we work together. And I think we need to learn how to do that better and mine the wisdom and knowledge and skills of all of us better.
That's hard. I try to tell my 2 girls that all the time. It does not work.
Yeah,
At least not right now, at 8 and 6.
Well, why don't we just put kids in age cohort groups in school and grade them individually, and then try and teach collaboration?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Any last thoughts, Michael?
The greatest magic happens when you get the smartest people, put them in one place, and have them work on one thing. That's how you get great software. It's how Steve Jobs had the architecture for the Mac in a little place called the Texaco Towers, where the smartest folks that he could pick were put in a little building behind a gas station. And I think that when we've seen that in organizations, that's where the magic happens. I agree that it's about being together in collaboration, so go to a yoga class and just don't do an insanity workout off a video in your basement.
Yep. And with that said, I mean, there's obviously going to be some magic that happens today, because we got a lot of smart people in one co-located place here. So take a break, and our next session starts at 1:30. I know it's short, but thank you.